All right, Linda is up.
Cool. Okay, so we started this all out as the idea of right? How to make a coat.
Everybody's got one.
Oh, you all.
Everybody came prepared.
All right. Okay, so we anybody need.
The phone isn't the. Oh, I have a rolling table, that's why.
So there's lots of different kinds of tailoring. Let's start with, there's bespoke. Bespoke is where they measure the client and they go straight to the fabric. Okay, so everything is specifically done to that client. Then there's made to measure. Made to measure is where they measure the client, they go to adjust those patterns and then make it. It can be a mix of hand and machine. And some use in that as well. Bespoke is mostly all handmade, and those can take months. And then there's ready to wear, speed tailoring, fast tailoring, and that's kind of where we're at this point. It's a lot more fun because you get your product in the end.
I have a question for this course. I know in London, there's a street where
Savile Road.
so they make all those by hand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So take a look at the royal wedding, look at Prince Charles, and look at his coats are all, his suits are all bespoke, and if you look at the fit on them, and it's just exquisite. There's no wrinkles, there's no, I mean, it fits
Nothing.
perfectly in the shoulders, and, oh my God.
There, I'm not sure, on the back page, I have a list of resources. It might be Permanent Style, or it might be the Tailoring Academy in the UK. When you start going through some of those and looking at their sites, you will see some of them. And there's one that has these videos, and they actually talk about making the uniforms in the UK for the guards. Some of those uniforms are 80 years old.
Wow.
And the cord is actually real gold.
Yeah.
And so those are all made bespoke for those guards. It's amazing. And so it's kind of fun to go through. This is a deep rabbit hole. You can go down really far. And unfortunately, I've kind of done that. But one of the things you learn is that pressing is like the #1 thing you're going to do. Think about making a jacket or a coat as baking a cake. What takes the most time? The cooking. And that is your pressing that you're going to be doing. Preparing your ingredients is the cutting and everything else and getting ready. And then the decorating is all the fancy stuff at the end. But the actual mixing your ingredients together, the actual time at the sewing machine is like the least amount of time you're going to spend making a jacket. So pressing is everything. Having a clapper,
Yes.
having your silk organza or linen or cotton press cloth is just critical. Pressing will tell you the difference between a handmade garment and a professional garment. Do not stint on the pressing. And some of this pressing at times has to be overnight. You know, when you set your collars and stuff, you want to steam them and press them in and have them set, and then perhaps leave them overnight so that they dry in shape, and then they have that shape and they will keep it. But that is the most important thing you can do with your pressing. If you don't have a good steam iron, consider having a spray bottle of water. I have one of those right beside my table. It's always there, ready to go. A sleeve cord, you will need it for getting your sleeve seams. And a point press, but you want these nice tight points that you get real sharp. Fabric is, do you buy your pattern first or your fabric first? Fabric is the kind of thing that motivates me. I would recommend when you're starting out, start with wool. You can go to, and of course, if we're making an outdoor coat, you want wool. But you can always go to linen, cotton, jacquard, silk, whatever, when you're going to a jacket, and go from there. There's just so many different options, but each of those options, your fabric options, you're going to choose interfacings and notions. that all are appropriate to whatever your fashion fabric is. Always pre-treat your stuff, because the last thing you want is to have it shrink after you've had it made. London shrink method for treating your wool is one way that is going to save you the cost of taking just flat wool to the dry cleaner to have it steam pressed. And that's where you lay out your wool on grain, you take wet, damp, so take a towel, take a sheet, get it all wet, wring it out, lay it on top, fold this all up, wrap it in plastic, and leave it overnight. You want that moisture to sink into the fabric. And then you take it to your iron and you steam it. So you steam it. You take your iron and you come down and hold it close to the fabric. You don't put it on the fabric. So you want it close to it. So it's getting that heat and steam. That still to me is a lot of time. So I do what Pam Ernie does, which is the steam shrink at home. And I start with a sample. Always, always, always start with a sample. Take your wool, and I will take a 6x6 or 10x10. If it's really ravelly, I will serge the edges. I go down to the kitchen and I boil some water up, or I get really hot water out of the tap and I soak the wool for 20 minutes. Then I take that and I throw it in the dryer and see how it comes out. In general, this has worked really well for me. I've done that with most everything. This is a wool I just picked up at Fabric Place Basement and made this jacket. And I did that exact thing. So, you know, it really does work. You don't have to get it totally wet. You can take the wool, and I will also just throw it in the dryer with wet, wrung out towels, and just throw it in the dryer. The steam from that. So I'm saying don't always take your wool and soak it for 20 minutes. Just put it in the dryer with damp towels. And Pam Ernie has a big thing on off the cuff blog, off the cuff style blog post that she writes where she talks about that. And that is where I kind of heard about this and I've continued to do it, and it's worked really well for me. Okay. So one of the things about tailoring, the most important part of tailoring is you're creating structure in your garment. And you are going to use all sorts of different elements to create that structure. In there, you have got things like hair canvas. So hair canvas is, in general, only like 22 inches wide. This came from Fabric Place Basement. It's about $15 a yard, 12 to 15. And it actually, the warp is a fiber. The weft is actually horsehair. Yeah. Yeah. And you can feel this. It's very stiff. And this is what you're going to use to create the structure inside the front of the jacket or coat. I
said maybe another toe.
It's incredibly durable. For men's jackets, that will be in the entire front of the jacket. And so, you can look at some of these guys and they look really great in a suit. And then you see them without the suit and go, oh, they're not as nicely sculpted as I thought.
Yeah.
The jacket is sculpting them. So,
And then what's that called?
horsehair canvas.
Horsehair canvas. Okay, I didn't get the printout yet, but I will. But yeah, denied access. But I will print it out.
Okay.
Oh, so when I sent,
I sent a copy this morning. So maybe check your email.
I'll try that. Okay. Thank you.
So that's one thing that you're going to need to get for making your coat or jacket. The next thing is weft interfacing. And this is weft interfacing here. It is a lot heavier and sturdier than your standard knit interfacing. Okay, where's my?
This is the horsehair up close. That's
Oh.
horsehair.
Okay, so the weft is a lot sturdier. And it's going to give you a lot more body. Basically, rule of thumb, weft interfacing is going to be for all those pieces that are around your top, around your neck. So the top of the front of your pieces, the top of your back, the top of your sleeves. And then you're going to use knit interfacing. And knit interfacing is basically for the hemlines of all your garments. So the hem of your sleeve, the hem of your jacket, around thence. Okay, the weft interfacing is about $4.50 a yard, and the fusible interfacing is about $4 a yard. You can get these most every place. I did order some from Mood. I've ordered from other places. You can get at Fabric Place Basement. I just picked up horsehair canvas and weft interfacing. So I know they have it. Weft will come in white or black. Your knit will come in white or black as well. You're just going to get whatever works for your garment, your fashion pattern. You will hear talk about pocket lining. That can be whatever kind of fabric you want it to be. You know, if you're making your coat, you want something warm for your hands. So have it be your lining. You don't want to make it too thick or bulky either. So I wouldn't necessarily put your wool on your pockets. Pocket stays. They're actually really pretty important. You're going to need either muslin or silk organza to make your pocket stays so that your pocket bags don't hang and they don't fall. They make your pockets a lot more usable and comfortable that way. Shoulder pads. I don't use foam shoulder pads. I've actually taken to making most of my shoulder pads now. Really quite easy. And we'll talk about that in the Jazika. And sleeve heads. So sleeve heads are these little pieces of either lamb's wool or flannel, and you cut them on the bias and they go inside the sleeve, the cap of the sleeve. So we're trying to fill out this piece right here so that it doesn't collapse and you don't get little puckers through the top of your sleeve right there. And so that's where the sleeve head goes. And they're really important to making sure it looks like a really great jacket rather than something that's made at home. My mother went and got into buying silk ties used, and she was using them to make things. And she gave me all the insides of the silk ties. They are perfect for making sleeve heads. And that's what those are. So they are the inside of ties, used ties. They're already on the bias, and you only have to cut them to the size you want. The sleeve head will go from your front notch to 2 inches behind your back notch. And that's about the space that you want that sleeve head to be, in.
Wait.
For some places, you will see people talk about taking the top of the sleeve pattern and tracing the top of the sleeve pattern and cutting it with that and putting that. It's just another way to do it. So in that sense, it is going to go down into the sleeve a bit. I'm not going to say one way is right or wrong. This tends to be a little bit more traditional. I mean, it's one way to do it.
How far does it extend into the sleeve?
So usually it's about 2 inches wide, and you cut it, you sew it along the seam line from here to that. The closer you sew it to the seam line, the more poof you're going to get right in here. Okay. If you don't sew it as close to that actual seam line, you get a little softer amount there to puff it up so that it doesn't collapse. So it's kind of a personal preference. And then, of course, if you're using like a men's suiting, so really super fine wool, you're not going to want a whole lot in there. So you have to kind of test and see what you like in there. And you can just baste it in, see if that's enough, and then move it further back or move it further in where you actually adhere and stitch it in. So that's linings. We typically think of using Bemberg. Bemberg is really great because it takes the wear and tear. You don't have to treat it. It's silky, it feels good. This is Bemberg on the inside of this jacket. You get it in, you can easily find it. You can get it in a zillion different colors. You can use anything you want for your lining, whatever's going to make it easy to get on and off. Think about it with a coat, you usually have long sleeves. You just don't want it to grab on you. But the other thing to think about is getting kashi. And kashi is satin on one side, and then it's flannel on the other side, kasha. And this is the kasha lining. I got mine from Vogue Fabrics. I know that G Street has it. It costs about 15 bucks a yard, and it really adds a level of warmth to your coat that you will want. This coat I used Bemberg for, and I really wish I had used the kasha. And the guy at G Street was trying to convince me to get the kasha, and I didn't. I wish I had listened to him. So, other thing to think about is interlining for your coat. Interlining can be anything from just a muslin to a cotton, or all the way to thinsulate. And thinsulate is really going to keep you warm. You don't have to put it throughout the entire garment. You can put it just the front and the back, so your sleeves don't have that. But if you're going to add thinsulate, it is going to add to the thickness and the bulkiness of your jacket. It's going to take away a little bit of wearing ease. And so you want to be careful about that. You're going to have to adjust your pattern just a little bit to add that layer of thinsulate in there. Okay, patterns for a coat or a blazer. There are lots of great patterns out there, but you really want to be careful. Check your patterns out. Vogue has the Claire Shaker patterns if you are interested in a challenge. They get a lot of great reviews, and they have really detailed instructions. So it's a really great set of patterns that they have. I think if you're starting out, there's some things you want to think about. What's going to make it easier for you, such that you end up with a successful project. And then the next one, you can always add more challenge to. So you need to think about the fitting. You need to think about the collar, whether you want to do a roll line or not, whether you want bound buttonholes or even buttonholes that are machine done. What happens with outerwear, the buttons tend to be a little bit larger, and so many times they're too large to go to your automated sizing that your machine will do. And so then you're kind of in this Netherlands. What do? You can, and I have done this, you can buy off Etsy, if you have an embroidery machine, embroideries of buttonholes, and get the right size that way. And you can get whatever style you want that way. But so that does work. It's an alternative. Be comfortable with manually machining your own buttonholes to the exact size if that's what you're going to do. The other thing is think about doing something with a zipper or with a hidden button placket. And that's one reason why I like the bamboo coat by Waffle Pattern. It's one of the reasons why I chose it the first time. And I started making that pattern a number of years ago, and I've made it up many, many times now. And as I say, it's the bamboo coat by Waffle Patterns. And I highly recommend the pattern with a few exceptions. It's got some good shaping. It's got some nice challenging pieces to it if you wish to do those. It has an addition to it now with a funnel collar rather than a roll-on collar. But you have to be aware, one, its seam allowances are 1/2 inch. And I made a jacket and I made it all wrong because I made an assumption about seam allowances and the jacket cannot be worn. So just be aware of that. Also, their instructions for a welt pocket, I don't know if I can even figure them out at this point. I don't like them at all. And so I do not recommend their welt pocket instructions. Just move past that, use your own instructions for making a welt pocket. You can use their placement lines. The Jazika blazer is the one that I'm wearing. And this is by Closet Core Pattern. And it really is a great basic blazer. And the reason why I looked at the blazer was because it has all those tailoring techniques that basically you're doing the same thing for a coat, is you're making a tailored blazer on a grander scale. She offers the pattern. She offers a package of tailoring supplies. So in here, you have all the supplies you're going to need to make her blazer. You have your weft, you have your hair canvas, you have your knit, you have your roll tape, you have your shoulder pads, you have your sleeve heads. And she has some pretty unique sleeve heads. And they are shaped like the top of a sleeve. And they do have a tad bit of hair canvas in them as well to really reinforce this front area right here to stop any puckering and everything, collapse of the shoulder. So that is available through her website. And I wanted to see what she offered before I felt like I could recommend what she offered. She also has an online class. And so I think what did I say down here? It's $59 for the jacket and jacket pattern and the online class. And I thought the class was great. I thought she held your hand through it the whole time. It made it really easy to do. You can just go back and watch each little section. She breaks it down really simply. Now, it is a simple jacket pattern. This does not have a vent or cuffs. And so you can do all sorts of different hacks to it that you want. This is the same one. And on this one, what I did is I did a workable sleeve vent. And so I actually went and did the vent, mitered the vent, and put in the sleeve and everything. So I do recommend her class for that. And I do recommend the course. Her patterns. She has 33 pattern pieces. And I ended up having to color coordinate which got cut out of which piece so that I could stay on top of it. And she does offer in there patterns for making your shoulder pads or for making sleeve heads. So she will walk you through that as well. And making shoulder pads is very easy. So it's nothing, you know, in fact, these are ones that I made. And you can make them as thick as you want, as stiff as you want. You can add hair canvas to the outside, have them get a little bit more body to them, but they really do work well and you can get the style that you want when it comes to that. So I do recommend that. The Auburn jacket by Cashmerette has gotten a lot of great reviews online. I know nothing about it. I have not done it, but it does offer cup sizes, which we all know can be a lot nicer. Oh, the Jazika does have a D cup. So you can get the D cup for that as well. So I would take a look at that as well. And she has blog posts on the Jazika or the Auburn blazer by Cashmerette. She has blog posts that is so long, and it'll walk you through step by step by step by step. So there are a couple others that I would consider. If you've heard of the Sapporo coat, the Sapporo coat was very, very popular for a while. And then all of a sudden it died off. It's got these really great style lines. Because people started writing and saying that this didn't work, or that didn't work. And sure enough, they got one gal, and I can't remember her name now. And she reviews patterns, and she finally posted a blog post of about 10 different things that were completely wrong with the pattern. Yeah. Yeah. The next day, Paper Cut Patterns took the Sapporo coat pattern down. They completely reworked it, and they've republished it as the Nova coat.
So it must have really had some
It had some
flaws.
It
in
had
there. It must have
significant
had
flaws.
some-
Yeah. And so, but they republished it, and anybody who bought the Sapporo can get the Nova. So if you have the Sapporo coat pattern, go get the Nova coat pattern. Be aware of that.
I hope they paid her.
So,
A huge amount.
but that's kind of the problem with indie patterns, is there is no necessarily quality control. So you've got to be really, really careful. If you're going to buy expensive fabric and all the stuff to go into them, you want something that you know is going to work. So, you know, do your research on this. So at this point, I would say, yeah, the Nova coat's a great coat to make. It has no buttonholes. It has no buttons. It does not, it just kind of meets at the center. It has big pockets on it. It's a very loose style, not too fitted. And people love it. And the style is kind of cute, kind of cocoon-like. It really is kind of cute. The Style Arc has got a lot of patterns. There's one they just came out with, the Ormond designer coat, and it is a tie belt. So it looks really nice. Style Arc has a lot of good patterns, and they are well known for their drafting. So
I've heard about style. I've never tried style, but what I have heard is the directions.
yeah,
That's what I've heard, but I've heard
Limited.
the styles are fabulous, but the directions assume you know how to do a lot of stuff.
yes,
You already know how.
I would agree with that. Whereas like
I've never-
bamboo, they're a lot more in detail. The Jazika, it's a lot more in detail with the pattern, with the directions. And I believe the Auburn is as well. People talk about the great directions on that one. So take a good look at those before you get going. So in terms of construction, when you are going to make a coat or a jacket, I tend to think of it as having these big chunks. And every time I get through a chunk, I'm like, oh, yay. But the first thing is prep. You know, you've got your pattern, you've done your fitting. You really need to do your fitting. And making up a muslin is really important. So this black and white jacket that I just made up, I made for my mother. And my mom happens to have a number of back issues. And so you can see she's got a lot of scoliosis and everything to her back. And so we went through and we fit this pattern to her 2 times. We ended up, you know, one hip is larger than the other. So there was a lot that we went through to get that just right to fit her. Every pattern piece is individual, you know, so this is all part of prep, is getting a fitted pattern that's going to work for you. So, you know, one side, the hip is so much higher, we need a lot more space, but we still want to keep a straight line across the bottom, the whole thing. Take that into account when you're making your muslins. This is why making a muslin is really important. Then you're going to cut it all out. So you got to
do you make a muslin for the lining as well?
No.
As the, just the shell?
Just the shell. Yeah. Yeah, and as you see here, I only did one sleeve. I knew that the sleeves would be different because her shoulders are so different, but I could adjust the sleeves as I was going in the production of the jacket. And so that was something I just left off, but I did make sure that the sleeves were fitting and they worked. So actually I cut out two. And on the first muslin, I made sure the right arm was properly done. Then on the second muslin, I did the left arm. And so I knew how long each sleeve was because that was how I had done it. And then at the end, I had her try it on and I made sure that my measurements on the sleeves were just right, you know. So I was basically within a ½ inch either way of where it was going to fall, and as I had shortened it. Okay, so fusing is the next thing. You need to spend time fusing. And fusing, as I say, is really, really important. You are going to, as I say, in general, this is on your major pattern pieces. So this is your sleeve. Now this is a coat, a winter coat that I am making for my daughter-in-law. This is their surprise birthday present. So we've used weft interfacing at the top, and we've used knit interfacing at the bottom. These pattern pieces, you don't really have to have, just so long as you know where it's going to go. So every hem, you just cut 2-inch wide strip of your knit interfacing and you fuse it to all your hem spots, your vents on your sleeves, your body, your back. And that's all you need to know about that. In the Jazika pattern, you will have a pattern piece for every one of those. So it really holds your hands through it, which is nice in some ways. In other ways, you're like, oh my God, there's so many pattern pieces. But once you've made a couple of them, you'll see, you know, this is not hard to do. This is the back. Nope, that's the front. That's the front. Where's my back? Here's the back. Okay, a back pattern piece, same thing. You just have the knit at the bottom, and then you have the weft at the top. And you want this weft to go down right to about the shoulder blade area. You're trying to make the dimples and the bony protrusions all softened by the sculpture that you're creating with that weft interfacing.
Your pattern have that piece, or did you cut that yourself?
I cut that myself.
You did that yourself. You just
On the
cut it
pattern piece, it shows you a dotted line.
direct. Okay, so even references.
Yes, and it
Okay.
does. And so what I do is I take that pattern piece, I lay it down on my weft interfacing, I cut from this point to this point, all the way around the edges. I lift off the pattern, and I know I'm going from this point to this point, and I just make a curved line freehand. Yeah. And you do want to take the weft out of where you're doing your darts. It makes it really hard to do darts if you've got the weft interfacing in there. It's just too bulky. Your front is the same way. This is one of the fronts. So again, here's my weft interfacing on the top. I cut out from here all the way around, and then at the bottom, just a curved line, and I cut out the space for the dart so that the dart doesn't fall in there. At the bottom, I have for this, I used 4-inch wide because I wanted a little bit firmer structure at the base and the hem of the jacket. So there's the knit interfacing at the bottom. And then there's knit interfacing going around where the pocket placement will be. Okay, so that's the fusing you're gonna do all at the beginning of making. So you have to get all that fusing done. The fusing takes, it really does. You gotta use steam. If you don't have a really good steam iron, this is when a nice cotton or silk organza press cloth, a spray bottle of water, and a really good iron. An iron is press, hold, count to 10 to 15, lift. Press, hold, 10 to 15, lift. And then wait till the whole thing cools before you move it. The thing is, if you don't, you will end up getting bubbles, and you will see that it has not adhered properly, especially from the right side, you will see that. And so it's just not going to look good if you don't get your fusing done well. But this is part of speed tailoring. If you weren't doing the fusible, you'd be doing this all by hand. And so we're skipping a lot of time by doing this. Yeah. And then the other thing is trim off a little bit on your edges so you just don't have as much bulk in your seam allowance areas. Okay. And if you've ever wanted a rotary cutter pinking, this is the time to get it because you will really use it. Using the rotary cutter is what you're doing on these edges. This will stop it from having this sharp edge that you can see the difference of where the interfacing has been fused and where it isn't. So having a rotary cutter to cut this edge, you can use rotary scissors as well, or pinking shears as well. But those edges, having that rotary cutter to the edge stops that harsh break and all that. Okay. So take your time with that. And then you are gonna put this is where your horsehair canvas is. And it's supporting this dimple that we have here in our front. And so having that horsehair, it smooths it out and you get this smooth, fine line. And so all I've done is I've catch stitched it. Now you want to cut it out on the seam line because you really don't want this horsehair in the seam lines. Okay, it should be just on the seam line. So because it's just so stiff that to try and press it in a seam is just impossible. So then you just catch stitch it real loosely right in place and it will be the best. That's how you do it. Makes it a lot easier. Okay. That is the prep. And once you got the prep done, you're like, wow, big chunk done. Ready to move on. If you're going to do pad stitch. So this is the first time I have tried pad stitching. And I found it to be rather easy to do. And I pad stitched the collar. We will see how this all turns out. The pad stitching allows you, as you're holding it in your hand, to create some turn of cloth. And so it's giving you that little bit of change. And you can see here, these two pieces were completely even when I started the pad stitching. And so you can see how I've taken that little bit out. This is the under collar, so it'll be on the inside. So it should be shorter than the outer collar on the outside of the funnel. So, and you also can see how I took out the hair canvas where I'm going to do a bound buttonhole there. So I took out the hair canvas and I did put in the knit fusible to cover the bound buttonhole area. So that, and then that's the regular outer collar that will go with just the knit fusible. So doing any pad stitching, if you're going to do it for your collar, your under collar, if you're going to do it for a lapel, this jacket, I did not do any pad stitching in. None of these jackets have any pad stitching in them either. You create the same effect of pad stitching in the speed tailoring when you have another, you fuse the front piece like we did here. You add an extra piece that is just this wedge of the lapel. Okay, so in the lapel area, you have two fusibles, one on top of the other. So it just adds this little bit of extra body to the lapel area, and it gives it that stiffness. Now, the piece that you fuse is this piece, right? All the way for the front. Along the roll line, you can do a couple of different things. You can keep the piece as one, or just cut it along the roll line. Fuse this piece and then fuse this piece. Because you cut it, you've created an extra softening part for the turn of the lapel line. It makes this roll a lot easier to do by having 2 layers of fusible here and the cut line there. You just don't have that structure right on the roll line. And so it turns a lot easier. Then you're going to be applying your stay tape for your roll line. When you do this, now you can get fusible stay tape. I don't know where I got my stash, and I couldn't actually find it as I was preparing to bring things, but I did have it. Be sure it's not bias, because bias will stretch. But if you have fusible stay tape, that is stay tape, it is rigid, it won't stretch. You are going to apply your roll tape, your stay tape, to the jacket side of the garment. So this is just on the other side. This is on the jacket side, and this is the lapel side. And you can see there's a number of layers there. There's this layer. You can see the cut right there, the fusible stay tape and the weft that's on the body. Okay, so it's all designed to give you that roll that you can see. You can see the different layers. The roll tape, you're actually going to take, lay out your pattern piece, put the roll tape down along that edge, and now shorten it by 1/4 inch to almost 1/2 inch. Pin it in place, and then outside of the seam allowances, so in the body of the jacket, that's when you'd either steam it or hand fell stitch it in place. It doesn't take long, but you will notice there is, some gathering of the body. And the whole idea is to give it that ability to grip and curve into you, because it's a little bit tighter. And so it tightens up that jacket, makes it hug your body. And the roll line will do that for you.
What I found in some patterns is where they have the safety. They're not clear which side it goes on, and I have seen that multiple times because they almost tell you to put it on the line, which is certainly not correct. But I have seen multiple patterns, and I've had to go digging back when I've used it to other prints and which side does it go on, because they're not.
I know.
It's really not clear which. I mean, logically, you're right. It doesn't. When you think about it, it does make sense. But I have found directions to be not. I mean, I have lot of them aren't clear.
Yeah.
They don't really, and it should be very simple to say it's on the jacket side, it's lapel. I mean, it's pretty simple
Right.
thing to say, but they kind of imply that you lay it smack right on the center of the line.
And you do not.
You do not know that it's, I
Right.
found that in directions that are definitely hard impressions that are not.
I
Clear many
totally
times.
agree with you. And I don't think that they touch on, if you're going to fell stitch it on, how to do it. Because of course, what's happening is if you're applying that, it is right here on this part of the jacket. It's right here. So when you're stitching it, you are not stitching all the way through. You are just catching a
Really
thread or
hard,
two. And that's all you're doing. The roll tape will add to the structure and it's just gonna pull in the other piece, the body of that piece. And so not going all the way through. And this is what you'll do is you'll just grab the weft interfacing as you're stitching that on. It's just grab the weft interfacing as you go. Okay. And then staying the front edges, and that is taking stay tape and running it all the way around. Now, in your speed tailoring, your fast tailoring, you don't need to do that. You will not always see instructions to stay this edge. The Jazika pattern does not have that instruction. They will instruct you to stay from here around the curve, just around the curve. Silk organza. Just take your strip of silk organza and put it down as you're sewing on that edge. And that stuff thin enough that it's just going to move into it. And you're not even going to be able to see it or feel it, that it's in there. But it is, and you have stayed that curve. So that curve is not going to, it's on the bias. So it's not going to all stretch out. Okay. So now you've gotten most of all your structure work done. And now you can do the big mind thing for me. At least it started out that way, doing bound buttonholes and welt pockets. The way I got over that mentally was I always bought extra fabric so that if I screwed up, I could remake the front and change my plan. But when I went down to North Carolina, I took a 3-day class with Kenneth King, and he got us into doing these bound buttonholes, and they are just fantastic. So this is a decorative one, so there's no inside to it. But there you go. There's the inside and the outside. On the Linton Tweed website, Claire Schaefer talks about doing buttonholes on the boucle. And so what she does, and she recommends, if you're nervous about it, doing a hand bound buttonhole. Her thing is do a machine buttonhole and then go over it by hand. No one will ever know the difference, and you'll get credit for having done a hand bound buttonhole, a hand sewn buttonhole. So that's another way to do a buttonhole that will look really up there. So there's that. And then of course your welt pockets, and we'll be talking about all these in detail next month. You're then going to put your sleeves basically together totally. So start with your back sleeve and then do your vent for your sleeves. So on this jacket, what I did is I added in the vent and I mitered it. And I just took the instructions. You can easily take the instructions from the mitered vent in the back of the Jazika pattern and then take those same things and apply them to the sleeve vent. This is one technique, is putting change of color. You see in some of the bespoke kind of jackets where they do little things, little techniques that just really make it go, oh, that's not what you see at your standard maker, something that makes it look like. And these are not working buttonholes, but a lot of instructors will tell you, you make them working buttonholes, and then you always, always, always leave the last button unbuttoned. Because you want everyone to know that your garment is so special and it is so high end that it has working buttonholes on the sleeve vent. And so that is incredibly important to leave that last button unbuttoned. Okay? So, get your sleeves all together, because when you, and this is the Jazika, and this is just the straight thing, there's no vent there, it's just buttons sewn next to the seam. Because once this is together and you put the whole sleeve together, try to sew those buttons on, going in and out of the sleeve. It don't work. So have your buttons, the whole sleeve completely done. The only thing you have to do then is insert it. Okay. So that's just another little chunk, and you can go, okay, here's my chunk done. Facings, I am loving putting my monogram on the inside of my facings. Just a little thing. I did that for my mother's. And I put a hot pink on hers. I'm going to do the same thing for Emily. So get your monogram done, insert your flat piping if you want at that point, insert your labels. So you want to get your label in there. Put in a hanging loop if that's what you like. But those things all get done. And then you're going to do your collar. Collars are something we can talk about more in depth. Collars and doing a collar like this with your roll line, it gets a little bit more complicated right here, because what you're trying to do is eliminate bulk right here. Okay. So in general, you're going to take your under collar and sew it onto the garment. So here I use the black felt as the under collar. You're going to take your upper collar and apply it to the facings. Okay. Then you're going to press those seams open, trim them, press them open, stitch them down to within 2 inches of this point. Okay. Now use pins, using pins, pin through and pin those 2 things in place. So you have them lined up where you want them to be. Hang it on a hanger, on a dress form, whatever, so that you can see how it's going to hang. And in general, they're going to pretty much match up. Remember, the under collar's underneath, the upper collar needs some turn of cloth room to be a little bit longer to go over. If you're using a very bulky, thick wool, you might need more room for that turn of cloth. So they're not always going to line up. So you might end up shaving a little bit off your under collar so that it can roll properly. Or, instead of shaving it off, just line those 2 lines up as you then go to stitch the 2 together. But you need that little bit of turn of cloth there, and you just want to check for it to make sure you've got the space. So after you've checked for turn of cloth and made sure that you've got it, you're going to take that apart. You're going to stitch from here all the way around to here on the collar. As we're doing this point, don't back stitch, just leave long thread tails, because it'll give you the ability to go and rework those points if you need to. Okay. So you've now gotten that done. And you check, make sure it's how you want it. You're going to trim up everything. You're going to use your point turner to press those seams open, to press into the corners, to be able to turn them really nicely so that you know it really works. Then you're going to do your seams from here down on each one. And the idea here is you're trying to, there's 3 seams that are coming together in one place. And you want to minimize all the extra seam allowance in that area. So you're going to be trimming away a lot of fabric in that area. And once you've gotten it the way you like it, when you've turned it, then you can tie off all the thread tails together. You're going to do all sorts of hand stitching in here to stitch these things in place. You can, this is that critical point right there. And all those seams have been trimmed back. They've been catch stitched down in place, so they're not going to move. So I can throw this jacket around, toss it around, not worry about how it's treated, but every seam is going to stay in place because it's there. And then when you've got it all done, you want to very loosely stitch on that seam allowance from the front to the back, right there. So let me show you. This is that corner position right there where all those seams are coming together. You can see they're all catch stitched down. And then this is the back. The 2 neck seams are coded together. Here's that 3 seams all come together and all catch stitching. Okay. So that is another really big chunk. Now you actually get to construct the garment. You know, now up until now you haven't really been able to do much of that. You know, now you get to put the garment together, do your side seams, insert your sleeves. Funny thing, on my jackets, I've never had to redo a sleeve ever. They just go in beautifully. So then you need to think about putting in your sleeve heads. You need to think about putting in your shoulder pads. In this jacket, what I did is I put in the sleeve head and the shoulder pad on one side and not on the other. So you can see the difference in the shoulders. This has got all that support and structure in it. This doesn't. It's just all falling apart. And so having the sleeve head here to support the seam and support the top of the sleeve and the shoulder pad in there gives it a real difference in appearance. You got to have those elements in there to create that. And you know, think about how stiff do you want your shoulder pads to be? You know, the ones that you can get at Joann's right now, I find are mostly those foam ones, and they're not care for them. They're not my favorite. So as I say, I make mine, and yeah, these are the ones that I've made. You just use quilt back, and it's just real loosely done, and you can see they're marked. Okay.
So is this like a cotton poly quilt pad or?
Yeah, it's whatever I had on hand. Yeah. Whatever was in the sewing room. But when you just loosely, so you can see, I've got my center marked here. I've got a couple layers in there, so it has a few more layers. Got a little bit more body to it. If you wanted, you could put hair canvas on the top of this to give it a little bit more structure if you really wanted something more. I like mine to be a little bit softer. But when you go to stitch them, you're kind of holding it like this so that you're adding that turn of cloth, just like we did with the collar. The turn of cloth is going in there so that these shoulder pads then come out curved because of that very loose stitching. Okay, and then hemming the garment. When you hem the garment, you want to cut down in your seams. This is the hem. And in here, what you can see is I have cut down my seam allowances. So they're graded. And the way to think about, because it always bugged me, which way do I grade? Which side do I grade to? And you always want to think about it from the outside of the garment's perspective. I'm ramping up. So you're always ramping up. So it's the garment, then one layer, then the shorter layer for this. So it's the inside that gets cut as short as you can. One thing I forgot to talk about was pocket stays. These are the pocket stays. And what you can see is I've just taken silk organza and used it for 2 different ways to stay the pocket. This first way, it goes and it gets applied before you put the pocket in, okay? We've done the same thing in this garment with a 1-inch wide strip of muslin. Think about your garments when you put on a jacket. We tend to put our hands in our pockets and then hang. And so we are putting a whole lot of stress and pressure right here. So when I put a stay from here to the shoulder seam, I've supported this area of the pocket. So it's not going to tear out as easily. Got a lot more structural support. So we're doing the same thing with this one by putting this pocket stay in here. And it goes right into the seaming of the structure of that pocket.
What are you putting in? You're putting the pocket in
Mm-hmm.
and then you're coming back?
No.
No.
No, so I have all the fusibles done and they're all in place. I have marked where I'm going to put the pocket. And then I have come in and said, I want to put my pocket stay in. And I have pinned this right in place so that it goes over the bottom side of that pocket. So that when I put my hand in my pocket and it's kind of hanging, you know, I know that that pocket stay is going to be giving some added support to the bottom side of that pocket. We did the same thing on this one. Just extra there to give support.
No, I've never done that before, but it makes perfect sense because you really start and you don't even, or you stuff your gloves in there or whatever, you know, your hat, whatever you get going. Now it's,
Exactly.
you know, just hands.
Well, okay, and so then for
So I
this,
have to do it on that one.
for this jacket, this is same thing.
Okay.
It just goes to the outside because your hands are going to be on the outside hanging, right? And it's just another piece right there. It's just loosely in there. Nothing's going to ever, you know, no one's ever going to see it. This is why you want to make sure you line your coats and your jackets. But now there's the second pocket stay. And this one has a second pocket stay. This one gets done at the end of the construction of the pocket, okay? And all you've done is you've stitched it to the lining and into the seam. And you've just basted it here and stitched it here. And the reason why is because if you don't,
Otherwise it just kind of keeps flopping down.
exactly. Okay, where's my other front? There's another front here somewhere.
Did you say you used the organza for that?
I used silk organza just because I like using silk organza for a lot of things. You could use muslin. You could use whatever you have on hand. Okay, there's another front here somewhere. Oh, well, we'll find it. It didn't walk out. But yeah,
But then you buy extra fabric.
Yeah, well, yeah.
those pocket pieces are coming out this way and around. And they're not going to stay in place. What's going to happen is that pocket bag is going to start falling on the inside of the jacket. And then it's going to fall. And every time you go to put your hand in it, you got to kind of work it around and get that pocket straightened out, you know, like you do with your jeans. Every time you put your jeans on and you straighten out the pocket bags. Well, this way you won't have to straighten out the pocket bags. And it's also more supported by having that there. You've got an extra thing to help support the set of keys.
Oh, no, that's what
The
happens. You should load up
phone.
the pocket and then.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the extra pocket stay that goes in there. Okay, collar, construct the garment. Linings. I never cut my lining out until I'm done with the jacket, basically, and it's time to get to the lining. So right now, I have a big stack of kasha at home. I cut out my pocket bags to make the pockets for this jacket. And so on the inside, she has nice satin that's flannel lined and everything. And then I cut that out at the end. And that way, if you've done anything, if you've done a fitting in the middle and decide you need to change something, add a bit, whatever, you've got it. If you are making a jacket that doesn't have individual lining pieces, make sure that you add an extra inch of fabric right at the center back, so that you have this little bit of extra. You can see there's an extra fold here. And if your pattern did not come with a lining piece and you need to cut out a lining piece from the original garment pattern pieces, add an inch at the center back and then just taper it down to the bottom. And that's all you do. And then add a pleat and pleat in that extra inch. So you've got some room for getting that jacket on, for moving your shoulders, for having wearing ease as you wear the garment. Okay. Insert the lining as you want to go. You can do your pipings as you put them in. This is one that I had done. Obviously, this one has the red on the inside to go with the red. So there's the red going in for the piping. Now, this coat I'm making for my daughter-in-law for her birthday. And so I saw this fabric and went, oh, this matches beautifully to her jacket. So I ordered this. This is a silk crepe de chine, and I will cut bias strips, use bias strips to make your flat piping. And I will put this between the coat facings and the lining. And then I will also do a hand rolled silk scarf. So she will have a scarf to go with it that will coordinate. And then I will use one of these colors to embroider her monogram on the inside of her facing. So that, I just got that in the mail this week. I was so excited. So there's, oh, this is the one where that pocket bag just hangs if you don't have the pocket stay. Okay. Buttonholes, if you're not doing a bound buttonhole, now's your time to do it. After you've inserted your lining, I machine stitch my facing all the way in, and then I typically hand do the bottom and hand do the sleeves. With the Jazika pattern, her class, she walks you through how to bag a lining. It's a great instruction. I had never done it before, and I did it for this coat, for this jacket, and I was really thrilled. You turn it inside out through the vent in the back, and that's how you get it inside the sleeve. No, not through the sleeve, it was through the vent. And the only place you hand tap down is on the vent. Everything else is done by machine as you stitch in that line. Okay, so basically at this point you have a jacket.
I do it through the sleeve. That's what I've done. Because then you can stitch it up.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, you never see it.
You never see the inside of the sleeve.
So buttonholes, if you haven't, and inserting bound buttonholes, you have to do at the beginning of the project. Now, this is where I find it's really crazy to go, oh, I have to sew buttonhole at this point. That's my stressor. Use a supporting buttonhole on supporting button on the back of your buttons. So the little, clear button to support your button on the front. You've put time and energy into this, make sure it lasts. Buttons are one of the things that go. Make it with a shank, but now you have a coat, okay? As Mary was saying, ASG is offering these virtual classes, and they have a 2-hour class on the insides of a tailored jacket. Hopefully, we've got 90% of that covered here. I hope. That's on Saturday, October 1st, and that is $22, and that's through National. As I say, Jazika has an online class that you can buy. Threads has an online class through Kenneth King. It's a 5-hour class. It's $100, but he has that. Cashmerette, their blog has a sew along that's completely laid out. You can read it and go through it real well. As I say, the Tailoring Academy and the American Bespoke Tailoring Academy, they have some online videos and advice, and they will go into detail on a lot of little things. There's some that you'll miss, but they also have online courses that you can take. If anyone follows Mainly, there's a gentleman in Maine, and he does all his own home construction. Mainly Man.
Yeah, mainly men wear.
Mainly men wear, and he does incredible tailoring that he has taught himself, and he has now gone off to the UK to invest in himself and take a bespoke tailoring class. Love Couture Sewing has some handmade tailored jacket courses. They're $1,300. They're out in Palm Springs. And the Susan Colgy sewing classes are available as well. Not exactly sure how much their online classes are, but she also has a sewing club you can join. So it's another place. And then the rest of this is really kind of just different references. Under Instagram, La Mano de Pate, I don't know how to pronounce that. This woman does tailoring, and she is a professor of tailoring in Mexico. And she posts videos of the tailoring and the sewing that she does. Today, she did some handmade buttonholes. They're gorgeous. They're just gorgeous. So she's got some fun things to see on there. Supplies, Bias Bespoke, you can find everything you need. Some of it's going to be real high end, but it's kind of basic. You can go there and you can get entire structures of the inside of a men's jacket by size. So it'll be all the hair canvas, all the padding, all the stuff that goes into it, and you just buy it by size and then apply it to the fabric. Kind of nice.
Yeah.
Books. Okay, let me forewarn you. These 3 books, okay, they are all the exact same book.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the Singer's the oldest one. It's like 1988,
Yeah.
2005, and 2011.
We're here until 12:30.
Yeah. So these 3 books are all the same. So just be aware, don't over.
You only find that out when you've got them all.
When you got them all, yeah, you're really interested. And you go, oh, this looks really good. Okay, I have that one. This is a fantastic book. I really, really like it. It goes through menswear construction and women's wear construction in detail, and it gives you plenty of great data. It's on there. It's by Fox Chapel.
Oh, got it.
Yep,
Okay.
the illustrated guide to sewing.
Yeah,
tailoring, third
it's-
one down.
It's really good. This is by Cecilia Podolak. She used to do a lot of sew expos. It's fantastic. This is a fantastic book.
I think I downloaded it.
Yeah.
I downloaded it.
This is my first jacket, and this is exactly right from Cecilia's book, you know, and it turned out beautifully. I still wear this jacket to this day. I've been wearing it for years. This is the original bamboo coat that I made. This is their way of making, well, pockets. And what you can see is they didn't have, the well pocket just didn't turn out that well because you can see the facings showing through. So I was disappointed in that. Still wear it. It's a great coat. That's why I say don't use their well pocket. So as I say, I just made this coat for my mother, and this is all fabric placed basement, except for the buttons. They came from Germany. And this is the exact same pattern. This is fleece. And so this is what I've just finished for her. And I did my cover stitch on it to get the hot pink seaming on it. And you can see it really has a difference in the back sides to accommodate her figure. But this fabric I just got last month. So, you know, easy to get. Okay. One of the things I really highly recommend is painter's tape in your sewing room. And there's a reason why. When you are dealing with a solid color like this, it is hard to tell what is the right side and what is the wrong side. Okay. So every time you cut something out, you take a little piece of painter's tape and you put it on the wrong side of the fabric. Couple of reasons why you put it on the wrong side. One, so you don't get any gummy stuff on the front side. Painter's tape is nice and light. It's not going to have a whole lot of gummy to it. Two, it's blue. You're going to see it and it won't go on your iron. Ask me how I know that. I used to use cellophane tape. Doesn't work so well. Okay. You really, really, really want to do this because you can get confused. So I made this coat with solid black sleeves. And what happened was when I made this, I turned this sleeve the wrong way. And so I ended up putting all the fusibles on the right side.
You didn't have any more, of course.
No. Right. And so all my sleeves have a different curvature to them. So I need to take this coat and take these sleeves off and then make them a little narrower because that's the only way I'm going to be able to recover these sleeves. But of course I've done all the work.
Yeah.
And I love this coat. And this is another bamboo coat. It's got the
placket,
the hidden button placket in it. And I love the look of it and everything. And I spent so much time making sure it lined up perfectly on the print pattern and everything, but the sleeves just didn't turn out. So any questions? Dutch label company. And they're really quite reasonable. 50 labels. I can't remember how much is spent for them, but they
just Google them. They have holiday sales and things like that too.
Dutch label company. Yes.
You can get anything on your labels.
Yes. And
It's a good Christmas present.
oh yeah. And I made some for my son and a Ryan Mott creation is what it says.
fun.
And because he was making a lot of ties.
Oh,
And so I used narrow so that he could do that. He was making ties and giving them to his friends, weddings and things like that. And so he could use it as the tie holder in the back of all his ties. It's a Ryan Mott creation.
It was cool.
I had a question.
Yes.
Linda, I enjoyed your class. It's very good. I want to go back to the shrinking. You know, when you were talking about taking the square and then, you know, wetting it and putting in the washer. So then after you finish that, what did you do to your main fabric?
So put it in the dryer, not the washer. One thing you really want to avoid is the agitation, Because
Right.
the agitation is really what's gonna fell your wool, you know, they talk about wool felling, where you take bags and you shrink it down. Don't agitate it.
Right.
So I get it wet and then I put it in the dryer, high heat with a wet towel.
But you don't do that to your main fabric, do you?
Yeah.
Oh, because I've used London shrinking. That's what I've used. Yeah.
So Linda,
Yeah.
this is Michelle. When you say you get it wet, how do you get it wet?
So there's a couple different times I will do things. So a lot of times I will take my sample and get that soaking wet to see how much it's going to shrink. Because I want to know what my worst case scenario is. And then I dry it in the high heat in the dryer. And usually it's not too bad. You know, it might be 1/2 inch on either side or 1/4 inch on either side. 1/2 inch is usually a significant amount, but 1/4 inch, and you'll notice it shrinks more one way than the other. But what I will do is then I will take 3 or 4 towels and I get those towels soaking wet, and then I wring them out. And so they are really pretty darn wet. And I throw them in the dryer and I take my yardage straight from the store and I throw it in the dryer with those wet towels and put it on high heat.
And you
And-
dry it till the towels get dry?
Yeah,
Okay.
30
Do you put-
minutes.
Can you put like 4 yards? Because usually a coat's about 4 yards. Do you cut the
Yeah.
yardage in half or you put the whole 4 yards?
I put the whole 4 yards in.
Okay.
This was a 4-yard piece that I bought. I have a lot of leftovers. I have another idea to use the extra up for her. But yes, all 4 yards go in the dryer with these wet towels, high heat. The reason why I do the sample is because I want to be able to say, what is this fabric going to feel like
Mm,
when I'm done treating it?
Right.
Is it going to feel good? Is it going to be rough? Is it going to be too poofy? Is it going to be something I really don't like? And if I don't like it, then I go back to putting it on the ironing board and steaming and pressing,
okay.
steaming the whole thing individually, which just takes forever. But that's what I will do, which is why I throw it in the dryer with towels because I don't want to do the
Yeah,
other.
it takes,
Yeah.
it's much faster. London shrinking takes an awful long time. I've done that. Yeah,
Yeah, it does. It really does, which is why I steam shrink in the dryer.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Any other questions?
On the lining, this one here,
Uh-huh.
you've got some piping that goes around there.
Mhm.
Is this right?
This is just a piece of.
How hard is that to do?
It's not. Your seam allowance is 5/8. So 2 seam allowances is 1 1/4. So now cut a piece of bias, 1 1/2, 2, 1 3/4. Fold it in half and then stitch it,
Not filled.
stitch it right along the seam edge of this or the lining. And you've got a perfect amount showing.
I like it.
Yeah,
It just adds this
Makes it
really
really
elegant
pretty.
touch.
is that little extra.
And, you know, it's like, I kind of like it because you got this something that nobody else knows about. Nobody else knows that I've got this monogram in
Until you
here.
show them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like with this one, I also went and I did
Big stitch.
pick stitch right along the edge. I was gonna pick stitch the outside, but it didn't show. And I am not gonna put time into something that just doesn't show,
Yeah.
you know? But for me, when I go put this jacket on, I feel special. So unfortunately, we got 1 minute to kind of clear out of here.
I have a quick question. Linda, this is Jamila. So my
Uh-huh.
question is, from start to finish, what is the time frame that it takes you to make any one jacket?
Depends on the jacket. While you have seen this coat, and it is basically only through the beginning stages, I could probably finish it in one day at this point.
Okay.
Because
Is that the most basic jacket? And I mean, like, when I say basic, yeah, basic.
yes. it
No
is.
welts, just straight pockets.
I already put welt pockets into it, and I am going to
Okay.
put a bound buttonhole in the collar.
So you'll see when the chat is revealed, and maybe Mary will read, or I mean, we're all reading. I'm just wondering, when are you going to have us all join machine ready and go through start to finish on a class? When are you going to teach a class, not show us how to? When are you go? Yes, Linda. I mean, you go through all of this, so instead of that, everybody brings their machine, or it's a so Intel, however. I mean, I'm
I
laughing as
don't know.
you are, but I said in the chat, if the classes are reasonable, sign me up.
Well,
Or I'll
thank
just
you.
meet you at your house. You know, I'm always one for that. Mary, did you see that? I haven't forgotten your book, dear.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank
But
you,
who's that?
Linda. It's Jamila. Let me put my camera back on. I'm a little under the weather.
Yes, so no,
Remember
no
we
worries
talked about
that.
the pants? I was
Yeah.
doing the pants. I haven't made them yet, but that's another, yeah, anyway.
That's okay, so.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Linda.
Awesome. I did record this, so I'll, when it's done processing, I will, I'll
jealous.
post
Wanna
it on
make the
GroupWorks and I'll
jacket.
send it via email so that you guys can watch it later.
JT was kind enough, Mary, to send me the document, so I could ignore all of that, but thank you,
Excellent.
JT, and this was wonderful. So glad to see you all.
Awesome. So I guess maybe we'll have to have you'll have to come to the sewing retreat so we can all work on a coat.
When is it? When is this?
That's in January.
Oh, yeah, I'll be, yeah, I'll be good to go by then.
All right. Have a good rest of your weekend. We'll see you next month. And next month is early. All right, I'm gonna stop recording. Maybe.
I know, it's a big rabbit hole.
Oh, did somebody else already stop recording? Right?